We're going to talk about President Trump and a new wave of tariffs that he announced on Thursday, including a 100% levy on branded drug imports into the United States. He did say, though, it would only be imposed on pharmaceutical companies that don't intend to open new manufacturing plants in the United States. Washington also planning to impose a 25% tariff on all imports of heavy goods vehicles and 50% levies on kitchen and bathroom cabinets. We're getting some early reaction just in the last few minutes. The European pharmaceutical industry's representative body saying that tariffs on medicines would create the worst of all worlds. Certainly more reaction likely to come later today about that. But President Trump made clear that his concerns were based on the US, as he put it, paying for the lion's share of the world's pharmaceutical bills.
But starting today, the United States will no longer subsidize the health care of foreign countries, which is what we were doing. We're subsidizing others' health care, countries where they paid a small fraction of what, for the same drug, that what we pay many, many times more for. And we'll no longer tolerate profiteering and price gouging from Big Pharma. But again, it was really the countries that forced Big Pharma to do things that, frankly, I'm not sure they really felt comfortable doing. But they've gotten away with it, these countries. European Union has been brutal.
Well, as you heard there, President Trump singling at the European Union for criticism as he announced that fresh wave of tariffs. Plenty of European big pharma giants export to the United States, but it's causing ripple effects in Asia too. And our business correspondent in Singapore, Suranjana Tiwari, told me about the concerns there.
That's something a lot of producers and companies will be watching in this part of the world, and shares in pharmaceutical companies across Asia have actually been falling after that threat of 100% tariffs on imports of branded drugs from October 1. And that's unless their producers had already broken ground on US manufacturing plants. Now, markets had already been bracing for tariffs on pharmaceutical products. It's something that Trump had threatened in the past, but it's the companies with really big exposure to the US market that are likely to take a heavy hit. As I said, the ones that don't already have investments and manufacturing in the US. So, for example, one big Japanese pharmaceutical company, its shares tumbled 4.3%. And also a company in Australia called CSL also plummeted to a 6-year low on the stock market. But as we know, it's the uncertainty that's the real problem from these kinds of announcements. I mean, the trend has been that those tariffs will come down. That's what a lot of analysts are saying. But in the meantime, it's that uncertainty that can really weigh on share prices and cause the most damage.
Indeed, and it could, of course, just be the opening of a negotiation rather than a final word. Let's look at some of those other categories. An interesting collection: 50% on kitchen cabinets, 30% on upholstered furniture, 25% on heavy goods vehicles. Why do we know that he's gone after these sectors in particular?
Yeah, well, you'll remember when Trump announced his barrage of tariffs, it was called Liberation Day. That was in April. And he said, you know, these companies, these countries, these regions, these supply chains have taken jobs away from the US, and he wants to return them to the US. Furniture is a really interesting example because we know that China has been the factory of the world for so long. It's really built it up. The quality is excellent. The scale is massive. And when a lot of countries, companies were trying to move production away from China because of Trump's first administration and the tariffs he imposed then, they actually tried to move to places like Vietnam, to Malaysia. And what a lot of companies in this region told me is that even though they attempted that, they could not maintain the quality or the scale. And therefore, that's why a big chunk of manufacturing for furniture has remained in China. It's the same with pharmaceuticals as well. India and China actually make a lot of generic drugs. Now, this latest announcement seems to be not targeted at generic drugs, so they won't be affected as much. But as I said, it's the smaller companies, the companies that don't necessarily manufacture in the US, that will be a problem. And then we have trucks as well. Trucks are used all over the the world. Lots of manufacturing comes from Asia, especially in Japan. And the big question is, with a country like Japan, for example, it's negotiated a trade deal already. It's been negotiating for some time. How will these new tariffs impact those agreements already made?
Well, that wasn't President Trump's only announcement. He also telegraphed a so-called deal to create an American division of TikTok, which would be under US ownership. Now, he claims it has the blessing of China's President Xi Jinping, although nothing has been heard from either Beijing or TikTok's Chinese owner ByteDance about it. Of course, a relatively new law in the US says that TikTok will be banned in the country unless ByteDance sells it. Trump has delayed the execution of that law pending a deal to sell it. Speaking in the Oval Office, President Trump and his vice president lauded the plan.
So this is interesting because I had a very good talk with President Xi, a lot of respect for him. Hopefully he has a lot of respect for me too. And we talked about TikTok and other things, but we talked about TikTok and he gave us the go-ahead. You know, it's run by American investors and American companies, great ones, great investors.
We wanted to keep TikTok operating, but we also wanted to make sure that we protected Americans' data privacy as required by law, both because it's the right thing to do, but also because it's a legal requirement of the law that was passed last year by Congress. So we think that we were able to do that. Of course, we're going to keep on working at it, but this deal really does mean that Americans can use TikTok, but actually use it with more confidence than they had in the past, because their data is going to be secure and it's not going to be used as a propaganda weapon against our fellow citizens.
So is it a deal or not? Well, that's a question I put earlier to Chris Beecham, Chief Market Analyst at IG, which is an online trading platform.
Yes, and this is the key thing. You always get a lot of comment from the US side, not so much from the Chinese side, something we've seen with the US-China trade negotiations. It's also notable that the price tag that they seem to be getting this for, about $14 billion. Now, TikTok's revenue in the US is about $10 billion. So it's not much of a premium, really, when you think of if it was trading like a proper tech company, this vehicle could be worth more than $40 billion. So it seemed like a rather low price, which might explain partly why there's a lack of enthusiasm on the Chinese side for this deal itself.
Yes, indeed. And of course, you know, the White House does have leverage here to get this deal done because they have, in the past, the Biden administration turned TikTok dark briefly, suspended the service in the US for the last couple of days of his administration. So that's the leverage.
It is really. And the question is, would they really follow through on it, blocking it entirely, or would that be another move in the game to make this deal go through? It's, as you say, it has not really been finalized by the Chinese side. So there is a possibility that we have another stage yet to go, really. The question of what happens with the algorithm, of course, will they approve the export of that? It does look like this is probably not quite the full deal that Trump wanted. But as we know with this president, he likes to get a deal across the line, even if it's only a limited version of what he originally wanted.
And let me get your take, Chris, on that other story coming out of the White House, the announcement of a new wave of tariffs, most notably on the pharma industry. You know, after so many such announcements, many of which have turned into the openings of negotiations rather than the final word, what do you think the reaction on markets will be to this one?
Well, certainly the reignition of tariff discussions isn't great for markets. I think they'll be disappointed. But as you say, we've seen this before over the last few months, and usually it results in some kind of deal being done. That's the playbook he likes to follow. So I think the reaction could be limited. The questions remain over who gets hit by the tariffs in what size. But as ever, the devil remains in the detail, and that's something that takes a lot longer to appear.
Well, a breaking line on this particular story. We were saying we haven't heard from the Chinese side. We have now. The Chinese government issuing a statement just in the last few minutes, urging the US to have to exercise open and fair treatment when it comes to this TikTok arrangement, this TikTok idea. That doesn't sound like a mutually agreed deal at this point.